Hello, folks. Welcome back to World War II TV. On this, the occasion of the 80th anniversary of VE Day, and I will answer some of your questions later on and share some thoughts about commemoration and remembrance and speaking for a generation. And I'll explain more what I mean by that in a minute. But just before I get into that, I want to just do a bit of housekeeping about the channel. Basically, views have been down across the board over the last few weeks. It's not just me, it's the other history content creators. Not quite sure why. Is it the algorithm? Is it the mood? I don't know. But I'm just reminding you that the best way to support me is via Patreon. Links in the description below, or you can become a YouTube channel member and spread the word. Keep telling other people what we're doing here and remind people that although it's long format, we have a bit of fun along the way and we learn things, and you need a bit of detail to get into things. But that's my kind of housekeeping thing out of the way. So there's a lot to talk about right now. Firstly, I want to acknowledge that although we are commemorating VE Day today, that was only the end of the war in Europe. VJ Day, which there were two VJ days, technically three, because Harry Truman announced VJ Day on August the 14th. Then we in Britain, Australia, New Zealand, we celebrate it on August the 15th. In America, of course, it's September the 2nd, commemorating the signing of the peace agreement on the USS Missouri and all that. So there are more than one versions of VJ Day. So while we are commemorating the end of the fighting in Europe, there are thousands of Allied soldiers still at it out in the Southeast Pacific, out in Burma, out in India, many people in hospitals, etc., etc., etc. So I'm going to get that out of the way first. But my next thing is really, there's been lots of things that have been happening this week. Notably, if you followed James and Al and their We Have Ways podcast, they had the honor, and it is an honor whether you like him or not, of speaking to the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, on their podcast. And I'm not going to go into all it kicked off a lot of commentary on social media. I'm not going to, try and fight James and Al's battle for them, but I want to kind of bring up this idea. I mean, it's a standard on the new Pope we just announced, an American, isn't it? So there's a tendency for people on all sides of the political spectrum, from all countries, to speak for the wartime generation as if they ever had one single view about anything. And I've known hundreds of World War II veterans, and I can promise you, my old mate Frank de Rudder in the sidebar there, that they had as many views about things as the rest of us. There were left-wing ones and right-wing ones, very religious ones, atheists. There were Manchester United supporters, Liverpool supporters, those that didn't care about football, those that enjoyed being part of the war effort and were very proud of it, those that hated every minute of it, etc., etc., etc. So when we see footage, which has been all over the news this week, of, for example, London on May the 8th, 1945, and the crowds celebrating and people jumping in and out of the water around Trafalgar Square, all that kind of thing, or the same thing happening in New York. We mustn't allow ourselves to think that was everybody's reaction that day 80 years ago, because people are having different feelings about that. So let's start with the fact that if you're a housewife or you're a mother and your son is still a prisoner of the Japanese on May the 8th, what if your son, you already know your son is dead or your husband is dead? Are you absolutely duty bound to be part of the ceremonies in the street and be part of that street party? I think a lot of people did. I think a lot of people, even if they were dealing with personal grief, they did allow themselves to commemorate and celebrate the end of the war by being part of things, but not necessarily. The point I'm trying to make is that the reaction to VE Day was different for different people depending on where they were in the world. Some people, it was absolute unparalleled joy at the end of the war, and who are we to say that was the wrong reaction? For others, it was just relief. It was just, thank God that's all over. Thank God we can move forward. Hope for a better future. People were already, even before the war was over, they were thinking about a better world, education, freedoms, rights, and things like that. So I want to say that we must never find ourselves in that easy, soundbitey kind of way of saying the veterans wouldn't have wanted this, or the veterans wouldn't have wanted that, or the people who lived through the war wouldn't have liked this, that, the other. they are never going to agree on anything. Just look at the election results in 1945 in the UK. Yes, of course, Labour won, but people voted Conservative and very conservative and nationalist parties. They voted for the Christian Patriots, exactly who they were. I can't remember who they were. They voted for communism. Some voted for liberals. There were some interesting sort of independent parties people voted for, and some people didn't vote at all because they perhaps weren't yet certain about what kind of world they wanted. They were still just dealing with the shock of the fact the war had been so destructive. Because I think, and this is another point I wanted to make is that it's only at the end of the war can you really take stock of just what it had cost the Allies. And I don't just mean in terms of lives, although I primarily mean lives. I mean economically, destruction. The cupboard was empty. The country was broken, and that's just the UK. Look at poor Poland. Look what happened there. Look at the fact they are sold up the river by the Allies and by Churchill in particular. I'm not saying that as an anti-Churchill person. I'm mostly a Churchill supporter, but things were done, deals were put in place in 45, 46 that we can now look back and say, well, yeah, maybe that wasn't the right thing. Maybe that wasn't the fairest thing to do. So the point is that, as Al Murray was saying in responding to some of these people, unless you have the ability to conduct seances with all those who fought through World War II, and then at the end of all these seances, sort of gauge the opinion of that generation by some kind of poll, some kind of multiple choice. You know, did you fight this war for A, a better world for everybody, B, to get rid of it? That would be absurd to do that. So people are people the world over. I've met veterans who are very nice people. I've met a few veterans who frankly were arseholes, you know, a bit racist, a bit grumpy, a bit bigoted, but they all did their bit. And again, we just mustn't put them into one kind of category. It's just silly. Moving on from that a little bit, although I may come back to that subject later on, it happens when we have the commemorative events here in Normandy in June for the D-Day, is that whatever an event gets labeled as, people will find some reason why it's an inappropriate label, you know, and I sometimes myself, I'm uncomfortable with some of the terminology. For example, you know, is it a commemoration or a celebration? When can you use celebration to with regard to something like D-Day or V-Day or the end of the war generally? When does remembrance become celebration? When do we have the moments of bowed heads, moment of silence, the raising and lowering of flags, national anthems? When can that? How quickly can you move from that scenario to one of a street party or a liberation ball, which we have here in Normandy? And I'm happy with all those things going on. My analogy, and you may have heard me say this before if you're our long-term follower of World War II TV, is my analogy is something like a church social hall, or even a church itself, right? So during the course of a calendar year, a church social hall, you know, the hall beside the church might have a wedding party and a banquet and a reception. It might have a wake for someone's funeral. It might have the Boy Scouts awards ceremony. It might have the harvest festival. It might have a jumble sale, as we used to call them in Britain back in the day, or some kind of table sale. It might have a liberation ball on May the 8th every year. The point I'm making is all of those events are entirely okay to have, but not necessarily at the same time. You wouldn't want to be going to a funeral wake at one end of a village hall, and at the other end of the village hall, there are people doing the conga because they are celebrating Uncle Charlie's birthday. The point I'm making is that something like VE Day this week, or the D-Day week in Normandy, you have all these things going on kind of at the same time in the same places. Sainte-Marie-Église and Arromanches are very good examples of those kind of environments. I know I'm kind of veering off VE Day to talk about D-Day, but it's all connected. So in somewhere like Aramonche in June, if you haven't ever been to Aramonche, you'll have like the carousel can be spinning there and turning with people riding, children riding the horses and stuff, and the sort of jolly carnival music playing. You might have little poignant family ceremonies taking place on the beach where family members are leaving flowers in the sea for their great uncle Bertie who died the year before and couldn't make it to normally that trip, and they are maybe they're scattering his ashes. It's illegal, but people do it, on the beach there, and it's happening at the same time. And then there's a military vehicle parade, and there are people in the pubs, there are people having drinks. All of these things are fine, okay, but tonally it can shift very quickly, and we must acknowledge that people want to commemorate these events in very different ways, and there's nothing wrong with other people doing it differently to how you do it. If you choose to do it one way and they choose to do it the other way, your neighbor, even your own partner or people in your family, that's fine. We're all different. It's not, we don't have to follow some kind of particular way of doing things, remembering these things. And for all the people who went to London to be there for part of the VE Day events, either the actual VE Day today ones or the ones on the 5th when the holiday was, if you want to do that, then that's fine, great. I think I wish I could have been there with you. But if you didn't want to do it because in your family, maybe you lost 4 out of 5 of your relatives in World War II, and VE Day has very much a mixed feeling for you. As we say, maybe your family weren't even fighting in Europe, they were fighting in the Pacific or in India or Burma or wherever else, or they were prisoners of the Japanese, or your relatives were completely eliminated in the Holocaust. So VE Day, D-Day, all these events, people are allowed to commemorate them or celebrate them or acknowledge them in whatever way they want to. It's very much like, I'm going into another subject now, but it's all relevant because it's my Ask Me Anything. I can talk about what the hell I want to. It's like the poppy police. So in Britain and Australia and New Zealand and America, people wear poppies at the time of in November for Remembrance Sunday, etc., etc. And you can collect, the people with the collecting tins collect for them, and you can have a poppy. And now, personally, I will wear a poppy in November. I have friends who don't wear a poppy, or they wear a white poppy, or they put money in the box, but they choose not to wear a poppy. It's fine. It's absolutely fine. There's no, and if you have to have, you don't have to have a poppy that's bigger than the other person's poppy. You don't have to say, tell people how much money. I always wear. I hate all that. Commemoration, remembrance is about what it means to you, what it means to the different people. And if there's one thing that being on a YouTube channel, I'm being reminded of all the time, is that the views of these events, not only they change from individual to individual, they change from country to country. The Dutch people in the sidebar there, May the 5th is their important day. Fine, great. That's the day you do it. I mean, normally I went to this morning, Mag and I went to the VE Day commemoration in Bayeux, a little service, and we thought it was a little bit sad in its nature, in that we're used to going to the June the 6th ones, which are generally kind of not sad, but reflective in tone, because they're talking about the losses along with the liberation. But the VE Day one, I thought there would be a little bit more of a spirit of, because I hadn't been to one for several years, of sort of maybe reading the quote of someone in Bayeux who was, excitedly celebrating end of the war by, drinking a gallon of cider or something like that. But in fact, they were reading letters from a particular French resistance, a maquisard who was about to be shot at Mont Valérien in Paris. And it was his letter home to his wife or his mother or something. They read a bit of a poetry there. And fine, I don't have a problem with it, but I would have liked, if it had been my ceremony, to maybe have a little bit, a bit of sadness. Let's acknowledge those people in Bayeux who did not make it through the war, but let's also acknowledge the fact that it brought peace to the world. But it wasn't my ceremony, and they were entitled to it exactly the way they want to. And maybe some people, after a more formal ceremony, went home and kind of had a cheeky beer or two. In fact, we ended up going for lunch. Mag and I had a rather Mag had a rather disappointing pasta dish, and I had a rather disappointing souris d'agneau, a little kind of a joint of lamb, and it was just a bit there. But anyway, whatever. I'm going off on a real tangent now. The point is that in the times we're living right now, Woody's gonna go a bit serious now, if I haven't been serious before, is that just respecting other people's views, respecting that other people do things differently to you, it's fine. And we need to do that. You know, we need to just remind ourselves that just because someone else has a different way of honoring the war, or they don't even talk about the war, or they horror upon horror don't even read books about World War II. I mean, honestly, those kind of people bring me out in a rash, but I jest. The point is, we are all different, and that is what's to celebrate. That this is the seriousness of what VE Day represents, because I think if we're to move forward as a species, VE Day and VJ Day later in the year, they commemorate, honor, and indeed celebrate the coming together of peoples with different systems of government, different views. And it sounds like I'm reading off some kind of, trying to get votes, Woody's cheat cards, people of different color and creeds, but they said, okay, there's a greater issue facing the world right now, and that is Nazi tyranny. It is the Third Reich stamping their jackboots across Europe and telling people to think the way they do, and killing people who didn't have the same set of values and stupid, ridiculous, evil ideology as they did. And in principle, that those are the values of those who fought against that are worth remembering, continuing, and pushing forward with, because I put it on my Facebook page today. I am an atheist. I don't bang on about it all the time. I had some really interesting conversations with my friend JD of History Underground about faith when we were away in Guernsey, and it was really good for both of us to engage and talk about that. But there are 13 countries in the world where if I was living there and I was openly an atheist, I could be put to death. I could literally be arrested and put to death and tried for various crimes. It can be anything from blasphemy to apostasy, and I can do it. So, while people like that while that's happening, while people are being impounded, interned, people are being denied due process in various countries around the world, while people are still being judged and separated and divided and locked up based on their differences, we need to think about what these guys are fighting for back in World War II. Now, you are quite correct if you're thinking, but the people in World War II weren't broadly fighting for LGBTQ plus rights. No, they weren't. No, they weren't broadly fighting for that, although I would argue they were kind of fighting for that because they were fighting against the Nazis who were killing homosexuals because of their sexual preferences, etc., etc. So the point is, though, they were fighting for democracy. They were fighting for societies, cultures, countries, and nations to work together and decide things in a space of diplomatic, respectful debate, and then make decisions via due process, via voting, by referenda, via voting for officials and governing parties who will make decisions for us. So I'm going to stop talking about all this kind of stuff because you'll think I'm just trying to lecture people. I am not trying to lecture people at all. I'm just trying to remind you folks that VE Day is a time to just reflect about where the world was in 1945. A tyrannical, or two tyrannical empires were eliminated. The Third Reich and the Japanese, as they were in World War II, were eliminated as offensive nations. They are now part of the world. Japan and Germany are part of the rest of us. They are also part of the diplomatic processes that we talk about, United Nations, all that kind of stuff there. But we defeated those, but we did not get rid of all the things that as a species we are still dealing with. So just kind of have a think about that, and think about not assuming that people of one generation have a particular thought about something, not assuming that people from one country have a particular view on something. And if you do or don't attend the ceremonies, or do or don't choose to celebrate or commemorate or remember, if you don't wear a poppy, do wear a poppy. Just just let people chill. Okay, so there we are. I'm going to stop my my soapbox thing now, but let's look at some questions and things coming out there. So so you can begin firing away with questions, but not too many, just like a trickle, so I can actually deal with them. Okay. So this is one from Robert here. I'll have to read it. Can you think of any scenario where the Germans knocked out the Soviet leadership and yet a new democratic Russian government still carry the fight to the Germans? I mean, there's all sorts of possibilities, aren't there? Because if the Soviet Union is a union of countries that kind of goes back to what we were just saying. They're not all from the same religion. They're not all from the same language. They're not all from the same cultural background. So I suppose at any time during the Stalin era, if we're going to kind of call it broadly, there was a possibility of anything happening to steer things differently. I mean, look at what happened in 1917, 1918, 19. No one a few years earlier could have necessarily predicted the way Russia would steer its path through the second part of the First World War and their own revolution and things like that. So I suppose there was always possibilities. I mean, there's the other possibility that Patton wanted, which is not the question you asked, of the US arming Germany at the end of 1945 and pushing on into Russia. And let's not go down that rabbit hole of the possibilities of that one. There are definitely some cons there, and there are possibly a few pros as well there, given the Cold War that happened. But that's a big speculation for the furthest thing. Stephen said earlier, are we going to talk about Stalingrad today? And no, is a simple answer to that. But I did have, it's interesting you mentioned that, Stephen, because earlier today, I had a comment on one of the YouTube videos. It was the one Operation Flashpoint with John Curatola about the Ninth Army crossing the Rhine. And someone, and you never know who it is in his case because it's some kind of screen name with a nickname. So it's not someone with an identity. You can say, oh, this is John Smith from Wyoming or something. It was just a screen name. And he had a go at me for not acknowledging the Soviet bravery in World War II and not, talking about the sacrifices and the old stuff. And it's true. The old stuff of for every German soldier killed on the Western Front, there were 7 killed on the Eastern Front. And while he was going on about the Allies pushing on into the Alps, which we talked about with Steve Clay last week, as being a complete waste of time. And he said something like Goebbels would have been laughing hysterically at the idea of the Americans sending resources into the Alps when in fact the real fighting was happening in the Eastern Front and blah, 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 blah. I do have an Eastern Front playlist on my channel, and I can tell you, because I just checked earlier, there are 93 videos that are specifically about the Eastern Front. But of course, the Eastern Front comes up in other conversations as well. What I will tell you, because it is my channel and I basically make the decisions myself, the committee are the various different personalities that inhabit my skull there. I have been, since what's been going on in Ukraine, slightly less inclined to talk about the Eastern Front. Certainly, a couple of 2 or 3 years ago, before the war began, I was really keen on bringing in Russian historians and getting more from a Russian point of view and other countries that made up the Soviet Union. I'm a little bit less inclined to do that right now because, frankly, Putin is pissing me off, and the illegal occupation of Ukraine is not good, and Western historians are being Russian historians are being discouraged from talking to Western historians, so it's kind of not in an environment right now. So I'm never going to dismiss talking about the Soviet Union, World War II, and we will talk about it again. There'll be some shows about Bagration in June. Prit Butard will be coming on probably twice. Once to talk about the planning, once to talk about the operations, and we've done Bagration stuff last year, so we will absolutely return to the Eastern Front. But right now, I'm doing a little bit less Eastern Front stuff than perhaps 3 or 4 years ago because just I'm not in the mood. And if people have a problem with that, well, tough titty. Okay, so there we go. So let's look at some more questions. So Capo, do you think Britain could have kept its empire if the British public had the moral strength to pursue such a policy? What would that have required? Interesting wording there. The moral strength to pursue such a policy. I mean, I can only give my opinions about that. Britain had to give up its empire. It was about time. Eddie Izzard, the comedian, does a fantastic routine about, about Britain handing back its various countries, and he does it in like a mime where, and the United Nations are kind of going, there's another one behind your back. Then Britain's going, all right then, and handing back another country. It's very funny because Eddie Izzard, Susie Izzard, as she is now known, very funny. So I mean, the time of empires had to come, personally I think, had to come to an end. The Dutch Empire, the French Empire, um, the other empires that even America to some extent had an empire, Philippines, Puerto Rico, that kind of thing. It was time to move on. That said, I'm not one of those people who says that the empire was all bad. Of course, lots of terrible, horrible parts of the empire, but also there was some good stuff. There were some of the countries that the UK let have independence. Let have means sounds like it's reluctantly. Some of the countries that acquired their independence from the UK, it was very peaceful and very friendly and very civilized, and the British were there during the transition period. And other countries, like with the French, it was less smooth and a little bit more fighty. But I can only answer your question from my point of view, and I think in 1945, I think one of the biggest questions that is facing the nation at a kind of at a high end is what to do with the empire. I don't think that necessarily your average bloke or woman on the streets of Rochdale or Crewe or Cardiff necessarily were thinking as their main priority, well, we better give back these countries in Africa. I think they were thinking more immediate. They were thinking about education, health service, the kind of promises Labour and indeed Conservatives with the show we did a few weeks ago about the Blue Jerusalem, about the Conservative ideas for post-war England, which in some ways were very much in sync with what Labour were promising. So it was more of a universal healthcare attitude and more rights to education for people of lower classes, that kind of thing. So I think that's what people were thinking about. And if you had been bombed out, when are you going to get a new house? That I think that was also a priority, and that kind of thing. So I think people, obviously, we're going down another rabbit hole. It's your fault for asking me the question, but obviously, people at the top end who had investments in Malaya and the other places around the empire where they were basically making money, they were very concerned about losing the empire because they were concerned about losing their fortunes. But I think, as I said, I don't think my family, at the bottom end, I'm not saying that my family were shoveling shit exactly, but my family were not gentry landowners. They were kind of more thinking about healthcare benefits for working mothers, those kind of things. So yeah, I'll go. I don't mind going on record and saying it was right that the empire came to an end, even if there are problems with some countries going through a period that was quite extended after gaining independence of things not working perfectly. That's essentially divine manifest destiny, isn't it? If you get when your kids leave home, you let them go out and go into the world. Now that sounds a bit patronizing, that Britain is the parents and the countries are the children going into the real world. But you'll understand my analogy is that independence means the right to do things the way they want to, and they will get things right, they will get things wrong, because our government has got things drastically wrong. Our government, meaning the British government, over the centuries, and you learn from mistakes and move on. So yeah, so I think I've answered those couple of questions there. I wanted, this is not a question, but Andreas made the point, which is interesting, that Berlin had a holiday in honor of VE Day today for the first time ever, and the only German state to do it. So that's interesting. I didn't know about that. So thanks, Andreas, for sharing that. That's yeah, just interesting. Can I tell you more of the London event this Saturday, please? Grant says. So the link to the Peace in Europe conference is in the description below. If you're anywhere near London this weekend, there are still places. I understand that it's free. You just have to register. Eventbrite, you can get your tickets there. There are people like me, Jenny Grant, Gavin Mortimer, Edmund O'Sullivan talking about various aspects, and just basically follow the link and find out what's going on. I think they've, well, not I think, they have shuffled the timing slightly. I think I'm now on at 9:30 rather than 9:15 or something, or 9:30 rather than 9. I'm delivering the keynote talk, and it is about the use of YouTube as an educational tool and what I have achieved. Well, no, frankly, what you guys have achieved by allowing me to waffle to you and talk to people about World War II. So that's what I'm talking about there. It's a half an hour or so. And so I'm going over that. And it's organized by Edmund O'Sullivan, and it was an honor. And I'm going over there. So I leave at the crack of a sparrow's fart tomorrow morning to catch a ferry again. I've been to the UK more times in the last 6 months than I had for several years before. So, including my mother's funeral last month, and visiting my mum in the year. So, and the filming and stuff. So yeah, back on the ferry again. So let me have a look for some more questions again. Do you think, this is kind of bouncing off the last question, Magister there. Do you think the British should have stayed longer to better manage the partition of India, Pakistan? I mean, possibly, with hindsight, yes. I mean, possibly, given what's in the news right now, not necessarily Britain, but maybe, and I'm not telling India and Pakistan what to do, but maybe some kind of international advisory committee to stay in the area for a bit longer to try and transition things to working agreements, some sort of United Nations thing, maybe would have made things better, or maybe not. Maybe it wouldn't. I don't know. It's what I just said. You know, these countries needed to gain their independence, and they did, and it hasn't been perfect, but there's also bits of it that have been successful. So yeah, it's maybe, but maybe not. So so Sir Capo is just to underline the fact he's not necessarily saying the British Empire was bad or good. I'm saying loosely it was obviously bad for British interests in terms of power politics. But again, I don't know that that's necessarily the first thing in your average British person or any citizen's mind. I mean, this is, again, I can only speak for myself. And you're going to think, oh God, is he going to mention Brexit? I am going to mention Brexit. I think probably on balance that most of us don't have enough information to really have a strong information-based response to a lot of things our country is getting up to. I don't know that I really understand economic trade policies and tariffs and things like that. I'm clearly not the only one who doesn't understand how tariffs work. You'll guess who I'm referring to there. So I kind of have this idea that I will put my faith in my elected officials, be that France, where I live now, the UK, to make those kind of decisions for me. For referendums or referenda, to me, should be more based on things where everybody does have a natural reaction to something. So I don't know, fox hunting, for example, in the UK, I think is something your average person in the street either thinks it's okay or it's not okay, or even something a little bit more controversial, abortion rights or things. I think people have opinions about that kind of stuff because it's easy to have an informed opinion about that, and also an ill-informed opinion sometimes as well. But I think basically, when it comes to, I think in 1945, to go back to your point, Sir Capel, I'm not sure your average British housewife or bloke on working on the trains or returning Tommy from Burma really had much inkling of how relinquishing Malaya or something was going to affect what they call it. The pound in my pocket is how politicians refer to it. I don't think that was in most people's thinking. I know what my grandmother was thinking in 1945, and I know why she voted for against Churchill and for Clement Attlee's government. My grandmother liked Churchill. She had photos of Churchill on her wall, I believe, in her house in World War II. She worked as a women's voluntary service. She worked on an American airfield, a little bit giving out, tea, cups of tea, and things like that. And she liked Churchill, and she liked the fact that Churchill had guided the UK and the Empire through the war. But she felt that as good as he was, she wanted something different. And she liked the idea of what Attlee was offering because she had been working a little bit, just a little bit, for the WVS in World War II, but it was a little bit of independent thing outside of her marriage and her being a mum to my mum and my aunt. That little bit of independence. And I think she voted, well, I think she voted for a little bit of a change, a little bit of I don't necessarily have to be behind the kitchen sink all day and just ironing my grandfather, her husband's, shirts. And not that my grandfather was a particularly sexist or misogynistic guy, but I don't know that he necessarily knew where the kitchen was. If I'm being brutally honest, he might peel the spuds for a Sunday roast, but that was my grandmother's job. And I think my grandmother kind of voted for a bit of change. I don't think my grandmother, well, I know my grandmother was not lying in bed in 1945 worried about the money coming to the UK for rubber or aluminium or whatever it would be. So I can only speak from there. So let's move some things. Seamus, which World War II commander who was killed, wounded, or captured early in the war had the most potential that they were yet to show, in your opinion? Nikolai Vatutin, Jock Campbell, or someone else? Francis Tuker is going to be my my answer to that. So Francis Tuker was incapacitated as opposed to dying, and he was the commander of the 4th Indian Division in North Africa, then on into Italy. Al Murray talks about Francis Tuker in his command book, and I think he had really quite good ideas about how to use a division and how to kind of bring a new kind of form of warfare. I think he would have risen up through the Corps and maybe later on. I think who else in that? I mean, I'm not a fan of Ord Wingate, but I think Wingate's death early in the Chindit's history changed the course of how the British used special forces. Now, maybe you could argue his death actually made better how special forces were used. I'm sure there are other people I would think of given time, but they are the two that come to my mind. There's an American general who was invalided out, and I can't think who it is right now. It might come to me later on. I don't know. I'll keep having a look through some questions there. Here's one from Gina. Who would be your dream guest to be interviewed on your channel, but not living, and why? So you have to say, but not living there. I mean, if we can go out, well, I mean, so not living, Audrey Hepburn would be up there. Just because she was one of the most beautiful human beings to ever walk this planet, but also to talk to her about the resistance in World War II in Belgium and Netherlands and Arnhem and things like that. Her interest in UNICEF and humanitarian work, some great movie stories. I'd like to talk to her. I think would be up there. Violette Szabo, the SOE agent. If she had, I kind of wouldn't mind talking to her. Who else off the top of my head? I mean, I was lucky enough to meet a lot of pretty cool people from World War II who I did get to speak to, like Bill Garnier from Band of Brothers, and Ken Tout, the British tanker who fought near Caen, other people like that. So, but dream guest. I mean, I suppose Churchill would be kind of cool to speak to, wouldn't it? With the benefit of what we know about history now, go back and kind of put things to him. Yeah, we'll see. I have to think, but I'm sure there are others that I would like to speak to. In terms of living historians, there are a few that I haven't had on who I don't want on, but there are a few who I would like to get on. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the basketball guy who wrote the book about the 761st. I asked him to come on a few years ago. I'd like to talk to him. Who else had I spoken? I tried to get in contact with, and I didn't get back to. I mean, Kate Winslet would love to speak to. I mean, it's a lot of women, isn't it? And partly that might be because I'm a bloke. And Kate Winslet about what she did with Lee Miller would be really cool to speak to. Tom Hanks, I guess, would be a real coup. To talk to him about the influence Saving Private Ryan, Band of Brothers has had on history. That would be cool. But I think that's enough. I've answered that one. I've given you a few answers. Andrew Wood, will the programming be taking more of a Pacific slant for the next few months, as the 80th anniversary dates are now apparently going to be for that theatre? Yeah, hopefully. A pertinent time, Andrew, to ask about how programming works on the channel, because it is a bit of a scattergun approach sometimes, and I it can be quite tricky scheduling things. I mean, I had some personal things going on. In fact, there might some other personal things going on over the next few months that might be affecting things. But yeah, my theme week ideas for sort of January, February, March didn't all come out to pan. There's also the fact that, you know, we're completely the COVID era is in the past now. So people are busy, they're teaching, they're traveling the world, they're going on tours. So pinning people down and getting their availability is a little bit trickier than perhaps it was when I started the channel. I haven't really, because of various things going on, I haven't given much long-term thought to kind of even July and August. I kind of know what I'm doing more or less, and June, yeah, kind of. And I've got some ideas there, but there will definitely be some specific content coming. And then after August, more likely though, and more on my list of things to achieve, is going back to more the theme rather than campaign weeks. So like infantry week, aviation week, you know, tank week, where we can leap about the eras, leap about through the years, and, you know, do Battle of Britain on a Monday and, you know, Kursk on a Tuesday. So things like that. So there will be some bouncing around, I think, after August. But also, I'm deliberating just how much post-war content to do. I don't want to start sliding into things that are away from what World War II TV is about. But at the same time, I will definitely be covering, to some extent, war crimes trials. I will definitely want to look at greater detail things like the DP camps, the movement of peoples around Europe, the establishment of some of the first sites of commemoration, which brings me back to the subject I started at the beginning of this show. Where in my head the debate is whether it's still World War II based or whether it's starting to go into post-war events. Like, I mean, I don't want to get into kind of covering, for example, as you mentioned earlier, the viewers, India and Pakistan, or for example, the creation of Israel. I think that all becomes away from the direct focus of World War II TV, but definitely expand on the idea of DP camps, displaced personnel, how movements around the world began. So I haven't quite decided what does and what doesn't fit in the parameters of the channel, but luckily it is my decision. There's me banging on earlier about the importance of democracy, but World War II TV is a benign dictatorship. I am the father-like figure. I am the Joe Stalin, if you like, the Uncle Joe of World War II TV. Perhaps not the best analogy, the best comparison there, but I will make the decisions based basically on what I think is best for me and for you lot. So we'll see. But yeah, I will definitely be, but to go back to your question, I will definitely be doing some Pacific content. No, as far as I know, Andreas, none of the conference talks are being video, but I may be wrong on that. I don't think they are. What I am thinking though is if it isn't video, which I don't think it is, I might kind of do the presentation I was doing there at some point to you lot about YouTube and what I think. We'll see. I may not. Yeah, we'll see. That's a good question, Jim. That's a very good question. Besides World War II, what other events and militaries do you study, read about, research? He said, well, I don't do much research and I just don't have the time anymore. But I have a smattering of Great War knowledge, and I can tell you right now there will be another World War I TV show. I still haven't determined the long-term future of that. It's mulling things over, but I will be hosting and Alex Churchill and Nikolai will be on talking about their new book about 1914, which is getting absolute rave reviews. I think that might be next week. It might be the week after. Watch for that. I may also stream it to World War II TV, so to the both channels. But so I have a smattering of World War I knowledge, but it never really has gripped me in the way other wars did. I did go through a US Civil War apprenticeship for a while. And then I realized that there are shitloads of books about the American Civil War, and I started realizing I wasn't just entering down a path; it was turning into a 12-way highway. I thought, no, backpedal from this. It's too much. You haven't got the time. You haven't got the money. You haven't got the shelf space. So I've got, like, I don't know, 18 inches of books on the Civil War, something like that. I did my alternate path at that time was I was still interested in American history, is I went into American Indian Wars, Native American Wars. So I've got a series of books about, Chief, what's his name? Oh God, of the Nez Perce, Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce, and the Comanche and things like that, and some of the conflicts. I've got about 5 or 6 books on Little Big Horn and things like that, and then that took me down a rabbit hole of just studying Native American culture, and I've got quite a series of books about just traditions and religions and practices amongst the various indigenous people of USA. I also like to have at least one book on other conflicts. So I've got Mark Morris's book on the Norman Conquest, for example. There's a book I've got on Khartoum and Sudan in the 19th century. I've got probably 3 or 4 on the Zulu Wars, Boer War. I read about terrorist and war on terror. Not so much. I kind of, like with my music tastes, I kind of stop after about 1975. So I have read a bit about Israel and the Arab Wars, 6-Day War, that kind of thing. So Korea, interestingly, not really. I've got maybe 2 books on the Korean conflict, but for some reason, no particular one. I've never gone down the Korean War rabbit hole. Novel going. So here, question from Shane: how would you characterize Canada's strategic and symbolic role in the Allied war effort in Europe? Well, I mean, obviously, incredibly important. But I would also venture that Canada, thanks to the work of Mark Zelke and Mike Bechtold and Ted Barris and Alexander Black and who else? Brad Sanquois and all those other great authors. I'm sure there's others I've forgotten. Arthur Glaxon. The Canada's story in World War II is being told, and it is finally getting out of just Canada. Brits are reading about Canada, Americans are reading about Canada. So I no longer think they're the forgotten ally. I think that China probably is holding the honor of the forgotten ally right now. So Canada absolutely outpunched, outperformed, and over-delivered based on their size and their population, as arguably in some ways did Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and other, going back to talking about empire, other parts of the Commonwealth, part of the wider former or still allied with the British colonies, countries, ex-colonies. So India as well, probably outpunched in some ways their role. So Canada, I think in some ways it's a pity that Canada were not part of the big four for all the peace negotiation stuff. I mean, de Gaulle, I'm not saying France didn't deserve to be there. And de Gaulle lobbied very hard and had made lots of friends. So, when we talk about the division of Berlin and the policing of Berlin, it is Britain, the USA, the Soviet Union, and France. I wonder whether Canada didn't probably deserve a foot under that table, so to speak. Canada probably, apart from their contribution to the North Atlantic and the general defense of North America by sea, and the getting the convoys to the UK, just the training of pilots, the incredible, and the training of officers, the Canloan program. I think that kind of not behind the scenes stuff, because it wasn't behind the scenes, but the air training program and all that kind of stuff, incredibly important. So Canada, I hope this someone will cut out this little bit of the video, and maybe in the future I might need to get Canadians dual citizenship, and someone will say, look, Woody, he really likes the Canadians, and the PM there will kind of offer me Canadian citizenship just in case I need it, just for the future. So I do really appreciate what the Canadians did, but as I say, I do not think they are now the unsung. They have been sung. They were unsung. Now they are sung. So I think that is a testament to the hard work and dedication of a generation of Canadian historians to push themselves to the front. And this is partly because the Canadians have been a little bit Canadian in the past, and have kind of been almost not happy being at the back of the room, but kind of that Canadian way of being very polite and kind of, well, okay, we're not being that. They've been a bit bolder recently and kind of pushed their way forward and saying, well, what about us? What about our men? What about our women? And so that's good. That's good that they're doing that. So that's that one. Here's a good one. Dean, is there anywhere on your bucket list and perhaps fascinated to visit with regards to wars or battles? So also outside of wars and battles. Yeah, I mean, at some point, I want to do a music tour of the USA, so I can stand on the corner of Winslow, Arizona, and do the Eagles song, and, Route 66. And friends of mine, Nick and Nikki from Suffolk, did that 3 or 4 years ago. And they told me about it. They like the same music as me. They're kind of hardcore rockabilly nuts, and they had their playlists worked out all in advance, so that when they are driving to Tulsa, they are playing Gene Pitney's 24 Hours to Tulsa. And when they're driving in other bits, they're playing Chuck Berry, they're playing the Eagles. And that really, really fired me up. And to go to the Brill Building in New York, and I'm in Memphis, and stand in Sun Studios, and where Elvis first recorded, and go to where Johnny Burnett and the Rock and Roll Trio first recorded, and Oklahoma, where Eddie Cochran's from, and Wink in Texas, where Roy Orbison is from, and Buddy Holly in Texas. So if a kind millionaire is watching this and thinks that Woody looks, a bit haggard and could do with a break, a few $1,000 via PayPal, so I could plan a music trip of the USA in the few years' time would be really good. Outside of that, which is kind of to do with music, fjords, Norway. I haven't been there yet. I'd love to get up there, see the Northern Lights, the Arctic. I'm jealous that Stephen Fisher has been down to Antarctica several times. Well, more than, in fact, he's off there again soon on his work. And he showed, that to be able to go somewhere and see, penguins and icebergs and ice flows and stuff, that would be very exciting. The Philippines, although that's kind of World War II. I'd like to go and see my cousin out in Tasmania, who I haven't seen for years. So there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things I would want to do. So there we go. Yeah. So what else? Let's look for some more questions there. Was reading Michael Nyberg's Potsdam Conference book. Yeah. Michael Nyberg he put photos on Facebook today. He was on top of the Reichstag in Berlin with Alexandra Ritchie. They're on a World War II museum tour there. And definitely on my list is to bring Mike on to talk about the Potsdam Conference, and with a view to talking about the future as well as what had just happened, because he'd be someone to really bring in, talk about 1945. And yes, Ian Carr, the Beveridge Report, and the welfare state and things like that, because it's important that I don't just talk about military stuff on World War II TV. There's the civilian aspect, there's the home front aspect, economy, changing the way the government's, structured, and constitutions, all that kind of stuff as well. That would be good. Yes, so let's look at so my comment about Francis Tucker. So yeah, indeed, Stuart. I always wonder how the casino battle would have turned out if Tucker had remained in post. So yeah, I think Tucker he's kind of one of my favorite people. Yeah, Rose is one of the German. He's not the American general I was thinking of, but he is one of the ones, Mehdi, that Korea came to an abrupt halt. Let's look for some more questions. This is a good one, Jason. I may I may end up, pissing my own shoes on this, and that some potential guests in the future may see this. But just between me and you, Jason, in your opinion, is there a particular Second World War subject that receives too much focus? So let's deal with that. Then what is there that has received little historical coverage? So the least historical coverage that should be is I have one answer for it, and it's Yugoslavia and the Balkans. There's 3 words: Yugoslavia, and 4 words: Yugoslavia and the Balkans. I just don't think we talk anything like enough about the partisans there, and the Retva, and the rivers there, and the all that incredible stuff there, and Tito, and people might say, well, it's it's a sideshow, but well, I don't think it was. I think, look at the number of German divisions that were there, and that could have been diverted elsewhere. I just saw a comment. I'm going to interrupt myself there, because Mega Rebel's saying Hepburn is Dutch, born in Belgium. You're kind of wrong on that one. She definitely was in Arnhem during the Battle of Arnhem, so she was in the Netherlands. She was born in Ixelles, just outside what's the capital of Belgium? Brussels, just us. My stepdaughter Chloe lived in Ixelles. I had the best fries I've ever had in my life from an outside food vendor in the square in Ixelles in about 2017. And you're thinking, he remembers the details of a meal really well. I promise you, they were the best fries I've ever had. So yeah, Audrey Hepburn was born in Belgium, and she eventually acquired British status. But at one point, because she was married to an American, maybe 2 points, when she was married to an American, she was American. She's very competent. Belgian, British, Dutch. She's claimed by everybody because they all love her, understandably. So back to Jason. Yeah, the Yugoslavia. I would love to see someone do a book on Yugoslavia, and I would still love to get a series of shows on Yugoslavia in World War II. But the only way I would do it would be to have Croat historians, Serbian historians, Bosnian and Herzegovina historians, Moldovan historians, etc., to present that wide range of views. And basically, they're not that happy about letting the others have their say. It's still very fresh because of the 1990s conflict, but Yugoslavia is my untapped, underappreciated theatre. It's going to blow my nose. Sorry about that. But in terms of what's talked about too much, so now when I say talked about too much, I'm not necessarily saying, in fact, no, I'm not saying that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have more books on the subject, because maybe we should, but books that look at it objectively, differently, and have something to say. So off the top of my head, Dieppe, the Dam Busters Raid, The Great Escape, Colditz, Midway, possibly Iwo Jima, possibly the Kokoda Trail, possibly the Battle of Britain, possibly Stalingrad, possibly D-Day. Again, I'm underlying, in case anyone's watching this going, damn, I will not contact Woody because I've got a book coming out on any of those subjects. About, again, I am not saying that more books on those subjects is totally, I'm not saying I don't want books on those subjects. I'm saying, just can we please find some new angles, look at things a bit differently. But to the hard practicality is that the audience of people for World War II are not quite as brave in their choices as they think they are, and I include myself in that. So what does Woody mean by that one? What Woody means by that one, let me have a sip of water, is rather like when we go to a restaurant and there's something new on the menu there that we've never had before, with some weird flavors and sort of, unicorn tears and and uh and I don't know what, python burgers or something. We go, oh, I don't know, that's a bit brave. So they come and we kind of choose an omelet, or we choose a regular burger. I think there's a little bit of that with World War II history. We kind of go into a shop and we look at books that are challenging us, and cool, I knew nothing about that battle there. Where's that country? What's that there? And then we kind of have a bit of kind of last minute nerves, and we go, oh, hang on though. There's a book on the dam busters, and we buy that because we can nod along to it to some extent. We know a bit about the dam busters. If you're Canadian, you know a bit about Dieppe, and you can either nod appreciatively at the historians because he agrees with you. Oh yes, I think the same. Yes, absolutely. Yes, he's right. Or you can shake your head vehemently and go, no, I disagree, sir. No, or madam, I do not like the way you're going with this history, and we can have that sense of satisfaction. So I think there is a market for the popular history, and historians have to sell books. They have to make a living. Podcasters have to get downloads. YouTubers have to get views. And I know exactly which shows will get more attention than others. And it is the sexy subject. It is D-Day and Midway and Cold Hits and The Great Escape and the things I've just listed. And if I'm going into, I'm trying to think of a show that didn't do as well as I think it deserved it. One of the ones I did on the South Africa in El Alamein, for example, didn't do particularly well. Oh, I don't know. I don't need to know about that. Or or some of the ones more recently we've done didn't quite land like I wanted them to, because it's a bit challenging, and you have to kind of maybe get out an atlas and look at where things are. So I think that there are subjects that are perennial favorites, Jason, and I think they will continue to be the perennial favorite. It's like the First World War. It's the Western Front, isn't it? People just want to read about the Somme and the first day of the Somme, and they want to read about Gallipoli, and there's other aspects. That's why Alex Churchill and Nikolai's new book about 1914 is going to be so revolutionary, because it is talking about different things. It isn't all about Tommy in the bloody trenches. And so the book I'm talking about, by the way, her new book is called, just while I'm thinking it in my head, because the name is sailed out of my head, Ring of Fire, not the Johnny Cash song. But yes, Johnny Cash, another place I'd like to go and see where he recorded in Sun Studios. But I'd also like to go. I'm leaping around the subjects. It's Studio B, isn't it? In the studios in Nashville, that one in RCA Studio B, where Roy Orbison recorded, and on the Wall of Sound. Go to where Phil Spector recorded, all that kind of stuff, and the Ronettes. And I'm hopping around the subjects right now. So there we go. But yeah, there are subjects that are covered more often than others, and there we are. Okay, there's a good one. What about examining the role of Brazil in World War II? I have tried. I have sent, not recently, but like a year and a half ago, I sent emails to at least 3, I'm thinking maybe 4 or 5 people in Brazil, historians there, or others who'd written about Brazil in World War II. I think 2 of them I didn't even get a reply from. And another 1 or 2, I got a reply, but it was no. Now, I understand language, blah, blah, blah. Maybe these particular historians only spoke Portuguese. They didn't want to speak in English. I don't know, but I have tried. But if you know how I like to do things on World War II TV, I don't just want to bring in someone who lives in London and have him or her talk about Brazil. I'd rather have someone with a real vested interest in Brazil, ideally a Brazilian, or at least someone with Brazilian ancestry or something who can offer that perspective. So yeah, Brazil is absolutely on my list. I will get there at one point. If you know any historians who might be willing to come on, please let me know. There was one person that I did find out, but their knowledge was not. It would have done a 20-minute show, but not like an hour. Does that makes? Oh, thank you, Alex. Studio B. Yeah, you can use my guest from 2 hours. See, you and Americans, we're just next door, 2 hours away. See, for 2 hours for me, I can get to Paris nearly. It's that difference of references of distance. For 2 hours for a Brit is like, you have to get your jabs done. You're crossing board. You're going from very county to county, Alex. People have to kind of lie down before they think about traveling 2 hours. But yeah, I'll take you up on that if I ever get there. So Finland is another subject, Alex, that it's on my list. And one of the regular viewers whose name escapes me right now, this is not that long ago, maybe 6 months ago, he gave me a list of about 4 or 5 Finnish historians. Same thing happened. Emailed all of them. Not a reply. Not a whisker. Not a. So you can only do what you do. And again, I think I will venture into Finland again. Don't forget, folks, when I started World War II TV in 2020, which would have been the 80th anniversary of 1940 and the early campaigns. I know Winter Wars, we're getting into 40 and 41 and stuff. At that point, I was taking baby steps on the channel, and I was only using people I knew. By the time we get round to the 90th anniversaries of the early part of the war, which is surprisingly not that far away, I'll be in my mid-60s by then. I'll be decrepit and old. I can tackle those subjects again, but I could again I could have British historians talk about Finland or American historians, and I'm not saying that they wouldn't be good, but I'd really like when I did the Philippines series, thanks to Tonnet, who I don't think is watching right now. Tonnet was my first friend in the Philippines, and now I've got others, Rico and Desiree and others out there. Is that when I did my first Philippines series, I had a couple of Americans on. James Zobel was on, and Richard Frank. No, he was in my Sino-Japanese book. But the majority of historians I had to talk about the Philippines were from the Philippines. So the same thing will apply when I do a series about the Finnish War, the Winter War, Finland in World War II, the occupation, aviation. I would like it to be, let's say, 3 or 4 Finnish guests, 1 or 2 American and British guests. So the balance is right. Okay. So yeah, I know they are. Finland is absolutely on my list, and in the sidebar before we went live, people were talking about their reading list, their pile of shame of books. I have a list of shame of the subjects I'm yet to cover on the channel, and it's long. There's entire countries I've not tackled yet. So Yugoslavia, I've done very little on that. Finland, nothing on Finland. So yeah, I will do it eventually. I will get if I don't get bitten by a poisonous monkey tomorrow on the ferry or something, I will get to these subjects eventually. For the record, there are no poisonous monkeys on the ferries between Portsmouth and Ouistreham. Well, not that I know of. Jason again. Your favorite Second World War battlefield tour and why? Least favorite battlefield tour and why? Most memorable cemetery that visited and why? Least favorite tour, did a private tour in Malta, and it was just a bit generic. I'd specified in advance. We're World War II buffs, and there's a lot of World War II stuff there. Don't feel the guide. It was a private tour, really made any effort to kind of bring things into us, special for us. So yeah, it was all right. I saw what I wanted to see, but it was a bit a bit beige, a bit hospital walls. Favorite battlefield tour. I mean, we love what we did in Guernsey, JD and I. Amanda Johns, fantastic guide in Guernsey. Nick Lahoure took us around there. The people in Alderney took us around there. Fantastic. And my JD's first Guernsey show came out today. The link is in the description below. And my first Guernsey show, apart from my choppy quality live stream, is from Guernsey, will be on the 20th with Amanda Johns. So that was really cool. But also in fairly recent memory, did some great stuff in Hungary and Prague with our friends Ross and Jeff, well, brothers Ross and Jeff. That was just good, seeing places never seen before. My favorite ones, really, and I'm going to be, get out my little sentimental, side of me. And when I'm out with Colin and Mag, and sometimes our other friend Matt, they're the best ones. When we're just in Normandy, we just go down the road, and we always stop for cakes. And there's always a cake stop. You can't go out and see a battlefield without a eclair au chocolat at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that. So when you just go off and you have a look at areas you haven't really looked before, and you find a monument you haven't seen before, you find a view of a battlefield. They're my real favorite, because I'm with my friends and the woman I love. Is there a particular unit or division that doesn't get enough attention or press from World War II? I mean, lots of them. The PBI, broadly speaking, the Poor Bloody Infantry. We have a tendency to want to hear about the airborne and the commandos and the rangers and the fighter pilots and all that. And the Poor Bloody Infantry were doing a lot of the actual bloody fighting. And, we have people like Peter Hart talking about his favorite units, Anzio and Italy, and Jim Holland's book on the Sherwood Rangers and tanks, things like that. Yeah. And generally speaking, the tail is harder to write about. So what I mean by the tail is the support, the logistics. And we're back to when Jason was asking about what subjects are more popular than others, is that I don't think you need to sex up logistics, because I think logistics are inherently important and sexy. But maybe your average reader, the kind of reader that has maybe read Ben McIntyre's book about the SAS or something like that, they've come at World War II from a Donald Miller, Masters of the Air, something like that, and you then try and sell them the idea about a book about the railway battalions or the Royal Army Service Corps or the vital work of the ordnance, the ammunition stackers, so to speak. So writing a book about that aspect, you've got to really sell it to get that to be a readable book. And people have done it, and people have done it very successfully, but it's not as easy. So the minute something goes into that real line stuff, the harder it is. I mean, that's why a book like John Parshall's forthcoming book on 1942 will be really good, because although he will be talking to some extent about combat units and fighting on the fronts, it's more about all those sinews of war behind the scenes and how what's happening here is affecting what's happening there. So yeah, the Poor Bloody Infantry don't get, to go back to your question, don't get enough attention, but the rear units as well. Am I planning World War II TV tours? There's one in October. We didn't do one in April this year. I normally do 2 a year. So the October one this year. So check out my D-Day Historian website. I'll put the link in later on. And it's a 6-day tour. And this year we're just doing American sector. And then I'll probably do a British and Canadian one next year, or maybe the year after. I do the occasional, really occasional tour outside of that, but I just don't have time. And frankly, I don't enjoy it like I enjoy the week-long tour, because it's people comprised of World War II TV viewers. So it's like a going out with your family, and there are beers and shenanigans along the way. But just meeting, regular clients and telling them about Santa Maria Glees and John Steele and all that kind of bullshit. I'd rather set fire to my testicles, frankly, than do that daily on a daily basis. I don't recommend setting fire to your testicles. So there you are. Is it true eclair means lightning, Jim? Not really. Not shock. Not really. We're not going to go into French language now, but no, basically. It is cute, man. I enjoy going out with you. They're the days I look forward to. Love you. Let's combat engineers. Who just said that? Dennis said that, and thanks for emails recently, my friend. It's nice chatting to you. Yeah, I think the figure is like 30% of Allied troops in Normandy by end of June were engineers. Building roads, clearing mines, putting bridges over rivers, all that kind of stuff. Absolutely. And I don't really like the distinction of combat engineers and therefore the other ones not being combat engineers. And if you don't understand this, I'll just briefly I know you do, Dennis, in that the USA had combat engineer units who are carrying M1 rifles, things like that, a lot of them, and they can engage if they need to, like the glider pilot regiment being trained infantry soldiers. They can do that job, and they can put together Bailey Bridge and do that kind of stuff. And then you have your regular engineer units who are just road graders or whatever. And this is why I don't like it, because just because you didn't have combat in the name of your unit didn't mean you weren't in adversity. It didn't mean shells didn't land on you, artillery bursts didn't go, or the enemy. So there's been this implication that combat engineers are the ones that are in the danger zone and just engineers are not. And in Britain, we didn't have a distinction. There were just engineer units attached to divisions and corps and what have you. And some engineer units didn't see a huge amount of flying lead, and others saw shitloads of flying lead, but we didn't have a distinction. But there is definitely this understanding that, or this false understanding, that a non-combat engineer unit therefore isn't in the front line, and nothing could be further from the truth. Stuart Burbage, congratulations on you. Your show had the most views of any show in the last 2 or 3 weeks on WW2 TV. So the unofficial, non-existent trophy of pride is on its way to you virtually. You may display it virtually on your mantelpiece. It doesn't exist, this, but pretend there is an award of having the most popular show for a few weeks on your mantelpiece. Well done there. 59th Staffordshire Division, going back to the question about units that have been forgotten. Absolutely. Along with the 53rd Welsh Division. I mean, there's a hierarchy of divisions in Normandy, a British, Canadian, American, that everyone knows about some of them, and everyone doesn't know about others. I mean, like the American 8th Division that came in later, and even the 9th Division, they're there in Normandy a few days after D-Day. They'd fought through North Africa and Sicily and what have you, and they don't get much of an attention. I don't really have a single book on the American 9th Division. 59th Staffordshire Division, which end up having, look them up, folks. They have a kind of a shitty time in Normandy, dealing with some really ferocious German defenders, and end up taking considerable losses. Look it up. It's what is the cake shop in Row like? The one, yes, no, I know the one you mean, Willie. So yeah, so there's and that's how you pronounce it, folks. Row, not Rots. So Row is just on the old N13 highway between Bayeux and Caen. So it's just south of Oti and Buron, where the 12th SS ambushed the Canadian 7th Brigade on the 7th of June, but later on that day got their ass kicked by other elements of the Canadian 7th Brigade and some of the 8th, I think. And then the next day, Kurt Meyer organizes his counterattack towards the Regina Rifles in Bretteville-Lauriers. And the SS were photographed in that lane and in the streets nearby in Row, both before the battle and then after the battle. They took some, and people go there now, and there's now a panel there on the side of the wall where you can see the photos of Otto Funk. I wrote a few times to Otto Funk back in the day, and the other side of the wall just happens to be a cake shop, and pretty good. I would rate it a good solid 7 out of 10, which means compared to like an average English cake shop, high praise, because I generally prefer before you start accusing me of not liking the country I was born in, Britain does savories really well. Greg's sausage rolls, you know, Colin, my best friend, loves his corned beef hash pasties and stuff like that. England knows how to do a savory treat at a bakery. A sausage roll, Scotch eggs, suit you, sir. But and the English and British can do sweets, desserts, and cakes well, but the French do it with a little bit extra, a little bit of a je ne sais quoi. We saw some today, and you Magano, you're just literally looking in a window of cakes, and just looking at them it's like a work of art. I digress slightly. So to answer your question in a roundabout way, Willie, is when you go in that cake shop there, but it's in a Row is quite a small, it's not a tiny village, but it's a few hundred people. Basically, there are 2 types of people who go in that cake shop. There are the locals who go in for their baguette and their pain au chocolat, or their whatever, pain au raisin, whatever it would be. And then there are the people who happen to be going there to match up the photos of the Germans and the SS in the street. And then, you know what? I'm a little bit peckish, and they go in for a eclair or chocolat or something, and they give you a look. The staff there give you a look. It's not an unpleasant look. They give you a look of, you've just been doing the photos of the SS, and you kind of do a shamed kind of yes, I have been just matching up the photos of the Panthers. Yes, but I would still like to purchase one or two of your delicacies, and so they give you a look there. So yeah, but yeah, it is it is it is a good, it's a 7 out, maybe an 8 out of 10. It's a good one. There's another bakery in a similar situation, is the one in Oti, Authie, which is where another horrible massacre occurred, and shitty stuff happened. The 12th SS did some horrible things to the Nova Scotias and the locals in that village there, and that has a rather nice bakery. But there, you see, I think I have had a cake there once when I was out. I didn't enjoy it properly because I didn't leave sufficient gap between acknowledging the death of people being run over by the treads of Panther tanks and having the whatever it is I had that day, and I didn't really fully enjoy it. It didn't. I hadn't left enough time. Does that make sense? World War II cake reviews, an idea for an entirely new branch of the channel. And sometimes this is serious, but semi jovially. Like anybody else, I use my phone and my computer a lot because I do this, and stuff just comes in front of my face, reels on Facebook and shorts on YouTube. And there are people out there making crap loads of money for just reacting to stuff. There's one particular guy with, who reacts to like people solving puzzles or something, and he goes, and don't forget to like and click the thing so it goes blue. You may know who I mean. And he's making shitloads of money for just basically being an asshole. And there's people like me and JD trying to do our work, and Rob at history, not history on, he's history explorer, doing all this stuff. And you're putting all these hours into giving people solid history, and some numpty is making money hand over fist by just putting out bullshit. Anyway, yes, Colin, the cakes in Turi Hardcore were particularly good. Was that a 9? Was that maybe a 10? We also do like the caramel eclairs from the one in Tilly-sur-Selle, don't we? Or Tilly-sur-Selle. That's in fact, we've done some serious detours to end up in Tilly. We've been in Madagascar and we've come back via Tilly. No, not quite. Just because of that terrible day, that horrible day when it wasn't open, and we were really, and we had to drive back to Bayeux, and we ended up getting something really shit. Or did we not even get cakes? We were so disappointed we didn't get cakes. One day we went back to the same shop twice. Was that Hermanville, Colin? Oh no, it was somewhere in the British. It was Omfreville, wasn't it? And it was only like 40. The cakes were so good, we went back 45 minutes later and had more cakes, which is good. So people are now thinking about a 9. It's a 9. No, it's a 9 for the cakes there. So okay, you're northern, Colin. Irish. You got a little bit harder to please. I'm a southern woofter. I'm easily pleased. So Mag will tell you I'm easily pleased with cakes and food generally. I set my standards low, and then I'm not disappointed. So there we are. I am indeed judging the battlefields of Normandy by the quality of the patisserie, Mag. Yes. You have to have some kind of system for judging battlefields, and I can't think of a worse one than judging it by its cakes. I mean, it's what, going back to how I started this show, it's what they would have wanted. It's what they would have wanted. They would want me and Colin, the veterans, I'm being sarcastic, they would want me and Colin to judge the deeds of the fallen by the quality of the cake shops 80 years later. Let's think about that for a moment. Yeah. You don't get this insight elsewhere. No, you're quite right, Roderick. We're going off on some real curious tangents. And I know I can't be completely boring because Mag's watching. When Mag's watching me, it's because she's not doing something better, frankly, because Mag's got standards. She doesn't want to watch me rabbiting on about stuff all the time. So, but you asked earlier about, I think it was Jason asked about the cemetery that, I mean, I think you can have a favorite cemetery if you go there with the right attitude. I mean, Colin was with me. We liked the Commonwealth War Graves Cemetery in Prague. That was really quite cool with the black embossed gravestone, unlike any other CWGC ones we'd seen. I think some ways though, Mag and I, the ones, our favorite ones are the ones you're not expecting completely, because Mag has got, you know, hawk-like vision. She can see those little green Commonwealth War Graves plaques at, 17 miles. She notices them. And we stop at a church, and you go in and you find a single pilot, or you find a, single victim of something, and they're really moving, because you're not expecting it. I think one of the things about, if you're an American, for example, taking a tour of the D-Day beaches, at the end of the day you're going to be finishing with the American cemetery overlooking Omaha Beach, and you kind of mentally prepared yourself for it. Okay, it's still the expanse of it, and when you sort of turn the corner, you come in through the wall of the missing, and you see all those 9,388 graves there. It takes your breath away. Even people like myself have been there hundreds of times before. It still does that. But there was a level of preparation you'd made, so there's an expectation of being moved, and so you're fulfilling what you're expecting. Whereas if you go to a grave that you didn't know was there, we were in Spain, Mag and I, and we found a grave of I think it was a pilot was washed up, and we were just going out doing Spanish stuff, and I think we went to a zoo that day or something, or a safari park or something. And then you find a grave, and it's because you're not expecting it, it ends up being very, very moving. So there you are. So let's carry on with some questions, because I'm going off onto some real tangents about nonsense stuff now. See, so you're all distracted by the cakes. None of you have actually put any new questions in. You're all thinking about your favorite ever cake. Let me blow my nose one more time. So yeah, throw in a couple more questions there, and I'll deal with them. So I've answered about World War II TV tours. We've answered about some of the units that don't get enough attention. Janet, thank you very much for pointing about, you can get some Norwegian historian names. We did have a discussion about that, didn't we? And yes, and you can come on again yourself, Janet, and do some stuff. And thank you for being one of those behind the scenes supporters of what we do here. Most appreciated. What was Monty's favorite cream cake? See, now I think it's going to be not the opposite of ostentation. He probably liked something fairly blandish, like shortbread. I can't see him going for a big, like, meringue type thing with raspberries and cream and custard. I can't see him going for that. I can see Patton going for something like that, and then kind of getting a bit of cream on his nose, and then one of his aides going, General, you've got a bit. What? You've just got a little bit of custard on your nose there. But I see Monty as, I could even imagine Monty not even eating cakes. I could even imagine Monty being that boring guy who, when the biscuits get passed around, doesn't even have. I could even see Monty not even having a rich tea biscuit. You've got me thinking now about the biscuit habits of generals and in World War II. Yeah, no, yeah, Jamie's with me on shortbread. Jay has gone for bran muffin. Yes, something healthy, like those. Okay, so I'm going off on another tangent here. I'm in a good mood. God, I've been talking for an hour and a half. Goodness me. Right, so there's the supermarkets here in France have like an international section, which the kind of French almost have this. There is nothing for you here to the French, but it is for people like me and Colin. It's lemon curd and peanut butter, and for Americans, and tea bags, and if you're lucky, you can get some custard there and some Cadbury's chocolate, that kind of stuff, right? But one of the things they have there are things like rice cakes. Those things you're eating when you're on a diet. I'm thinking, do people leave their country and crave like Ryvita, that kind of stuff? That all those kind of. I mean, I've eaten that stuff. I don't mind that kind of stuff, but I always wonder the choices in the supermarkets of who do they think is living in another country craving. What I really like is those really bland, tasteless water biscuits that are made out of sawdust and hamster droppings. That kind of stuff. Okay. Gareth is saying Monty's favorite biscuit may have been the Jaffa cake. So to be no, you see, because it is a cake, not a biscuit, isn't it? See, me and Colin are going to do this. We were going to do our podcast, and for various reasons, we haven't done it, but we will do it at some point. So, see, I call the Dutch stroopwafels, the circular caramelly, toffee, melty kind of waffly things. I call them Dutch invasion currency. There we are. So yeah, I'm still thinking that Monty either didn't have cakes or had something very bland. Yeah, I can now. I don't know why it came into my head, but Lee Mallory, I see something liking like those little fancy ones, little kind of the Kipling French fancies. I can see him liking something in a little kind of crinkly, like a muffin case, like a little doily thing. I can see him wanting something quite kind of particular. I'm not sure. Now I'm thinking about Eisenhower's cake of choice. Now, Eisenhower, I'm going to go with something kind of earthy and farmsteady, some kind of like raisin loaf or something, or something with fruit, something with sultanas and that kind of thing in. Even like a carrot cake. I could see Eisenhower something wholesome, sweet, but kind of traditional of the people, something kind of the people. Yeah, butterfly cakes exactly is the kind of thing I could see Lee Mallory liking. Yeah. So let's go back. Let's stop talking about cakes because it's getting fun but silly. So Jamie Lundy had a series, and I alluded to this in my conversation only about the Poles being sold down the rivers, and I think it's something Jenny Grant has talked about, is that, to appease Stalin, the Polish were not allowed to be part of the victory parade in London, which is just disgusting, and if ever there is a claimant for biggest victim of World War II as a nation, is Poland has to be up there, doesn't it? I think the Philippines will be up there with what happened in the capital at the end there, Rampage, all that kind of stuff, Manila. But the Polish, definitely are up there as a country that suffered the most. And not just its Jewish population, but its cities, the Warsaw Uprising, and then some. We talked about whether or not France truly deserved to be part of the Big Four at the end of the war, and whether Canada maybe deserved to be there. I think Poland fucking deserved to be part of that. Poland, which didn't exist in technically, you get into the fact it was Soviet and communist the next few decades, but if there was a group of people who should have been represented at the end of the war, in the beginning of the trials and, bringing of justice, the Polish bloody well deserved to be there and start saying, hang on, everybody had a go at us. Everybody should have a go. So yeah, but so I kind of probably maybe end it soon, but end it on that note that the league table of victimhood in World War II is not a league table you want to be high on, but we need to acknowledge that people are on a different place. And it's one of them. I'm going to go serious again. I'm still thinking. I am still thinking about cakes, though. I will stay awake thinking about that. But one of the things I've often believed is that the only nation, and listen to my wording, the only nation that truly won World War II was the USA. Now, the USA had lost, was it 340,000 of its people, which seems a lot when you say it like that. And I'm not in any way saying that wasn't tragic for the families of those people, but it's the smallest percentage of lost compared to their contribution. Poland, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa suffered as a percentage far more of its people. The Soviets, the Chinese, far more of its people. So but the USA, you have to say, comes out of World War II having been, even after the First World War, somewhere mid-table in the league table of global powers. They are absolutely at the top of that pile. the GI Bill and production and industrialization and just the yeah, you're sorry, David. It's 400,000, isn't it? Not 300,000. I'm thinking of UK is 320,000. My mistake there. My apologies. The US comes out there with spare resources and people owing it money. Britain was broken financially. France is broken financially, and part of it's destroyed. Norway's part of it's destroyed, broken financially. The Soviet Union, let's not go there. The communist, Hungary, Romania, all that kind of stuff. There's an aspect of France that I find really fascinating. That France has, even today, even 80 years on, still a big fascination with what I call Americana. Mag and I and Colin and Matt, we went to the Tour music festival a few years ago where the Stray Cats played the year we were there. The year before it was ZZ Top were there. And you get like one big American headline act, and there's other acts kind of doing rock and roll and rockabilly and country and bluegrass and Americana. And it's full of, we were the only, well, apart from Mag, native English speakers that we really kind of bumped into. It's all French and they love it. They got their Stetsons and their cuffed jeans like I wear, and their Gene Vincent hoodies, and their Elvis stuff, and you kind of ask yourself, where does this fascination with Americana come from in France? And you don't just see it in France, you see it in other countries in Europe. It's because in the 1950s, mid 1950s, America had what everyone else thought they deserved as well. What we call the American dream, the Donna Reed show, the white picket fence, the frozen dinners, the TV dinners, that kind of American image, the I Love Lucy idea that was being propelled around the world, the ideal family home, the car, the 2.4 children, the American dream. That's what France wanted. That's what Poland wanted. The UK wanted, and we would kind of get our own versions of that. But we had to pay off the war debt first. We had to rebuild our cities. As I always remind people, Britain is on food rationing till 1957, and I think the last kind of bit of clothing and furniture rationing was either 1960 or 1961. It is envy, Jim, but it's a positive envy. It's not a jealous envy. It's an aspirational envy. It's like we deserve that as well, and we will get there as well. And I think so. CinemaScope films. And John Wayne and the Searchers and that kind of big vistas on the big screen, and then having a frozen dinner and a car outside. I think that's where that seed of what France wanted came from, and I think you see that as well in in Britain. We're going to music again. The fascination with the Teddy Boy, which was a combination of kind of If you don't know what Teddy Boy is, it's a particularly British thing where it's rock and roll, but with the dress traditions of sort of Edwardian kind of young men. So the drapes and drainpipe trousers and brothel creepers shoes, which wasn't quite how the Americans do it. So it was a combination of like the Edwardian past, but this American influence. And that was the same kind of idea of wanting something different, and people putting gel in there, well, not gel, it'd have been oil and Brill cream and stuff in their hair and all that kind of stuff. And gosh, we're going off on another tangent again here, but I do that kind of stuff. I did have a DA at the back of my hair, when I had hair. I had a bit of a quiff going on there. I used to use the Brill cream and come up at the front and then sweat back at the sides, then kind of to a duck's ass at the back there. God, those days. And anyway, when I was in my real rockabilly phase. But anyway, God, we're going into and language. Yeah, brothel. Probably can't call them that anymore. But I have still got a pair of creepers in there. So creepers is from, and it's that mixing of things, because it's crepe soles, which is French. Like, and if you don't know, folks, denim, jeans, the American icon. I mean, everybody wears jeans. What's the Waylon Jennings song, Amanda? I'm nearing 40 and still wearing jeans. But jeans, which we think of John Wayne and Elvis, don't we? But it's French. I mean, the jeans are French. Denim is from de Nîmes, Nîmes, the city in France. Woody's history lesson. Stay tuned, folks, for more tidbits of history from Woody. Nîmes in France was creating very thick blue cotton material that was ideal for workers, and basically got over to the USA. And people like Levi Strauss and all that kind of saw that material and went, oh, hey, that's kind of neat. And they took the denim material and it became denim and it became jeans. And there we are. As you say, there's Stuart, pantalon denim. So so that's where jeans are actually French. Yeah. Well, you see, yes, Levi Strauss he had the idea for the rivets and the heart and that kind and the structure, but the material was French, and yet he was from Germany. It's the aren't we? Basically, that's going to bring it back to how I started this, is the fact that everything is shared. We're all from the same area. We're all connected. Everybody does things slightly differently, and blah blah blah. And that's what VE Day should be commemorating, remembering, is that we all came together. And this stupid, horrible nonsense of not liking other countries because they don't do things the way we do it, and all that kind of stuff. Just, God, it boils my blood, grinds my gears. So there we are. We're all related. I'm an immigrant. I'm not an expat. Expat is a word that people use that kind of it's self-aggrandizing. I mean, there is a difference. In fact, I was looking this up a few days ago. If you look up the definitions of immigrant and expat, there is a linguistic distinction, but I think people use expat in a slightly pretentious way of like, no, I'm from my original country and my allegiance is still there, really, but I will live in this country, but I'm still. And I'm not gonna. I unashamedly speak English at home to Mag, and I like my English treats, and I've got a packet of English polos here. A few of them left. I'll get a few more in London weekend. But I'm an immigrant. I pay my way. I didn't ask for anything. I've never taken a day's unemployment benefit in my life. I've worked all the way through. Can I speak? I can speak with an American accent when I'm in the right company. What I do is I start, Roderick, when I get into an American accent, it's when I have to start by listening to music. So when I'm listening to music, so if I'm listening to Carl Perkins, for example, who sings in a particular American accent. One of the things I liked about the Kinks, the British band, is Ray Davies sounded like a Londoner. Whereas as much as I like the Beatles, John Lennon and Paul McCartney, to some extent, tried to Americanize their accents when they sang. The Kinks were unashamedly English. Even the Rolling Stones, I think, kind of went a little bit rhythm and bluesy, kind of tried going off on a tangent. So to answer your question, Roderick, so when I'm in my car driving and I'm starting to listen to something like Carl Perkins, or who else has got maybe a distinct, Neil Diamond's got a distinct kind of New York accent, is that I will start singing along to the song in the accent. And then when the song stops, I can kind of carry on talking in that accent for a bit before it kind of wanes. So I can't just do it now. I can't do it on command, but I can get myself in the point. Now, I can also do a German accent, but it always ends up going into a Russian accent, and my Russian accent always ends up going into a German accent. I can't seem to keep those two separated. For there we are. And I, Stuart, I'm also defensive of the French performance in World War II. One last question for Lance on the Outcast Creative. And if you haven't followed Lance's channel, go there, look him up on the YouTube. He does some great stuff, Lance, interviewing people from the movie industry, and they review TV shows and movies. So go and check out Lance's channel. I'll try and put the link later on. Very good. Which World War II film do I watch at least once a year? So here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. One of my best mates, Warwick, who's an Australian photographer working in Hollywood, just gone back to Hollywood, arrived there today. He had never seen Where Eagles Dare. What? I mean, he's 47. 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 He's 6, I think, or something now, Warwick. And he's a World War II buff. He was a photojournalist out in war zones and stuff like that. He'd never seen Where Eagles Dare. And I was like, what the hell, mate? So he's watching, Darren Nesbitt as the Gestapo SS guy doing his. I seem to remember the cathedral was the other side of the square for the first time. So I watch Where Eagles Dare probably at least once a year. I probably watch The Great Escape once a year. I watch The Wild Geese, which isn't World War II, at least once a year. I can't get enough of that. It's awfully brilliant as it is. I love it. I mean, shocking, isn't it, Jimmy? How can you go through life without having Leslie? The running girl, Leslie Moore, part of the independent company, which she's brilliant. She's now guiding people around Holocaust sites. And Leslie, I've had dinner with her and seen that we have ways and stuff. Great person. And so happy she's in a lovely relationship. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. But Leslie, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, she was discovering war films for the first time. I was giving reviews of them on Twitter and social media. And it was amazing meeting people, kind of hearing from people who'd never seen The Great Escape, never seen The Guns of Never Own, and then was reviewing them kind of fresh, because I genuinely straight up wish I could go back and watch The Great Escape for the first time again. I wish I could watch The French Connection for the first time, and The Godfather, and Outlaw Josie Wales. I watched The Gauntlet last night, but Clint Eastwood was my movie of shame last night. You've never seen Kelly? What? You've never seen Kelly? So you have to watch it, Stuart. I mean, it's a classic. I mean, you have to watch it. That's it. Woody has spoken. So, yeah. And Jim, yeah, Darren Nesbitt was fantastic at We Have Ways. And yes, I like The Wild Geese. It's awful, but it's awfully good. And Richard Burton, Hardy Kruger, Richard Harris, Roger Moore, Ronald Fraser, Jack Watson, Percy Herbert, Barry Foster, Patrick Allen, Winston the Showner. I mean, what a fantastic movie. Anyway, I'm going to go now because it is getting stupid for talking for nearly 2 hours. So I wish I'd go back and watch those films for the first time, but I have to just watch them and pretend it's the first time and try and notice things I hadn't watched before. I'll tell you this, and then I will stop. I haven't watched Band of Brothers for about 3 years now, which is probably my longest ever period having not watched it. And I will do that at some point. I haven't watched Masters of the Air for a second time yet, which I will do at some point. And I think that tells you something, that I haven't seen it a second time. It just doesn't quite, just doesn't quite feel quite as, anyway. Right. I love you and leave you. Don't forget to click like and subscribe. So I think my next show will be on the 13th of May. I haven't actually listed it yet. While it's got a private listing, but I will make it public once it is doubly 100% confirmed. But I can promise you it'll be a doozy. That'll be me co-hosting with Matt Bone and a show about a new book written about the Battle of Britain that is going to be taking the world by storm. So we're just finalizing the details of that. Then later on the 16th, Becky Aikman's coming on, Andy Zimmerman's coming on. We've got shows about guns. We've got shows about the hunting for submarines. We've got Kate Viger's coming on talking about Mission Europe. We've got all sorts of things coming your way, which is very exciting. So in the meantime, I'm going to say thanks for watching me. Thank you for your questions right now. Those who are at the Gettysburg Film Festival, enjoy that. If you can make your way to London and come and see me waffle on about YouTube on Saturday at the Peace in Europe conference, the link is in the description. It'll be great to see you there. If not, I will see you next time. I had fun, and I'm going to still think about generals and their favorite cakes. That will be my my nighttime, trying to get, like, instead of counting sheep, I'll be trying to match up the generals with their cake of choice or biscuit. Cheers, everybody. It's been a blast. Bye.